Welcome to a story that may make you reflect on the hidden darkness lying just beneath the surface of everyday life. Before we venture into the chilling corners of a horrifying case that once shook America, I have a small request. If you're drawn to stories like this, unresolved mysteries and unsettling truths, consider hitting the subscribe or follow button so you won't miss similar content. Your support is the motivation that drives us to continue bringing you gripping and thought-provoking tales. Now, turn off the lights, get comfortable, and prepare yourself. What you're about to read is a work of fiction, but it mirrors the very real terror that once consumed a community when the veil of safety was torn apart by a cold-blooded killer. This is the story of the ultimate predator, a murderer who left a permanent scar on the American psyche. Harmony Creek, Ohio, was the kind of town where the biggest news on a Tuesday morning was whether Mrs. Gable's prize-winning petunias had survived the latest frost. Nestled in the verdant embrace of rolling hills and dense forests, it was a postcard of American serenity. White picket fences lined quiet streets, children rode bicycles without helmets, a minor transgression in a town where danger felt like a distant myth, and the scent of freshly cut grass mingled with the aroma of brewing coffee from the local diner. It was a place where doors were often left unlocked, and neighbors knew each other by name, by habit, by the rhythm of their lives. Detective Mark Jensen had called Harmony Creek home for all of his 47 years. He'd seen its slow, gentle evolution, from a sleepy farming community to a thriving, yet still intimate, suburban haven. His career, spanning 2 decades with the Harmony Creek Police Department, had been characterized by petty theft, domestic disputes, and the occasional lost hiker. He liked it that way. It meant the town was safe, and the people he swore to protect could sleep soundly. His office, cluttered with stacks of unsolved paperwork and a perpetually cold cup of coffee, offered a view of the town square, where the bronze statue of the town's founder stood sentinel, seemingly watching over the tranquility below. Then came Sarah. Sarah Jenkins was, by all accounts, a ray of sunshine. 23 years old, with a cascade of fiery red hair and a laugh that could brighten even the gloomiest morning. She worked at the Daily Grind, the town's most popular coffee shop, where her infectious enthusiasm and ability to remember every customer's preferred drink made her a local favorite. She lived in a small apartment above the bakery, a stone's throw from the police station, and her routine was as predictable as the sunrise. Wake up, jog through Harmony Creek Park, open the coffee shop by 6 a.m., then spend her evenings reading or sketching in her notebook. On a crisp Tuesday morning in early October, Sarah didn't show up for her shift. At first, it wasn't cause for alarm. Her boss, old Mr. Henderson, a man whose patience was as legendary as his sourdough, tried calling her apartment. No answer. He called her parents, who lived just outside town. They hadn't seen her since Sunday dinner. A minor concern escalated to a ripple of unease by midday. Sarah was responsible, meticulously so. She wouldn't just vanish. Jensen received the missing person report from Sarah's frantic parents, David and Eleanor Jenkins, shortly after lunch. He listened to their desperate pleas, their voices laced with a fear that was slowly twisting into panic. Eleanor described Sarah's last known movements, leaving her apartment around 5:30 a.m. for her usual jog. She hadn't been seen since. "She always carries her phone, Detective," Eleanor choked out, tears staining her cheeks. "It goes straight to voicemail." Jensen went through the motions, logging the report, dispatching a patrol car to check her apartment one more time. He interviewed Mr. Henderson, a few regular customers who had been expecting Sarah's cheerful greeting. Nothing. No arguments. No disgruntled ex-boyfriends. Sarah had been single for months. No financial troubles. Just a young woman gone. Maybe she just needed a break. "David?" Jensen offered, a familiar, well-worn phrase he used to calm distraught parents. "Young people sometimes take off, think they need an adventure." He didn't believe it for a second. The way Eleanor described Sarah, her deep roots in Harmony Creek, her routine, it didn't fit. For the next 2 days, Harmony Creek held its breath. Jensen organized search parties, focusing on Harmony Creek Park and the surrounding trails. Volunteer groups, fueled by Mr. Henderson's donated coffee and Eleanor's homemade cookies, combed every inch of the familiar landscape. Jensen walked alongside them, his gaze sharp, his mind replaying every detail from the Jenkins report. He checked Sarah's phone records, her bank accounts. Not a single ping, not a single withdrawal. It was as if she had simply dissolved into thin air. The silence was deafening, the lack of any trace more unsettling than any loud argument or visible struggle. This wasn't a runaway. This was something else. A knot began to form in Jensen's stomach, a cold, hard premonition that he hadn't felt since a particularly nasty hit-and-run case years ago, a case that had taken too long to solve and had left a lingering bitterness. On Friday afternoon, 3 days after Sarah's disappearance, the premonition solidified into a chilling reality. A local hunter, tracking deer deep within the forested hills bordering Harmony Creek Park, stumbled upon something that froze him in his tracks. Jensen was the first detective on the scene, the siren of his patrol car a stark, almost sacrilegious sound in the otherwise pristine wilderness. The location was remote, accessible only by a winding, barely marked dirt track. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth, a scent that would forever be tainted in his memory. Sarah Jenkins lay meticulously positioned beneath an ancient oak tree, her vibrant red hair fanned out against the fallen leaves like a macabre halo. Her eyes, open and vacant, stared up at the canopy. There were no obvious signs of a violent struggle around the immediate area, but the unnatural stillness of her posture, the almost artistic arrangement of her body, screamed violation. She was wearing the jogging clothes she had disappeared in, pristine save for a few smudges of dirt. But it was the detail at her side that truly sent a shiver down Jensen's spine. Resting gently on a moss-covered root, next to her outstretched hand, was a small, exquisitely carved wooden bird. It was no bigger than his thumb, rendered in dark, polished wood, its wings spread as if in flight. It was an object of serene beauty, utterly incongruous with the horror of the scene. "My God!" Jensen breathed, the words barely audible. He felt a cold dread seep into his bones, a feeling far removed from the usual sadness or anger that accompanied a death. This was different. This was precise, deliberate. The forensic team, led by Dr. Emily Carter, arrived swiftly. Emily was a force of nature, a brilliant, no-nonsense forensic pathologist from the state lab, whose sharp intellect was often masked by a somewhat reserved demeanor. She moved with a quiet efficiency, her eyes scanning every detail, her gloved hands collecting samples with practiced ease. Time of death is difficult without full autopsy, but given the decomposition, I'd say roughly 48 to 72 hours ago, Emily stated, her voice calm and professional as she knelt beside Sarah's body. No obvious cause of death here, no major trauma. Looks like ligature marks around the neck, very subtle, and some defensive wounds on the hands, but minor. She didn't put up much of a fight, or he was very quick. Jensen pointed to the bird. "What do you make of that?" Emily carefully photographed it, then lifted it with tweezers, placing it into an evidence bag. An unusual signature, detective, carved from a dark wood, possibly mahogany or walnut. Very finely detailed, not something you'd find mass-produced. She looked at Jensen, her gaze intense. This wasn't a crime of passion, Mark. This was controlled. Ritualistic. That word ritualistic hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. It spoke of something beyond Harmony Creek's understanding, something dark and premeditated, alien to their peaceful existence. The news of Sarah Jenkins's murder ripped through Harmony Creek like a wildfire, incinerating the town's sense of security. Parents clutched their children tighter. Doors that had once been open were now locked, bolted. The cheerful chatter of the town square was replaced by hushed whispers and anxious glances. The police department, accustomed to quiet days, was suddenly overwhelmed with calls, tips, unfounded fears. Jensen, along with Emily Carter, became the reluctant face of the investigation. He spent long hours in the makeshift command center set up in the town hall, poring over evidence, interviewing everyone who had ever known Sarah. Emily worked tirelessly in the lab, sifting through biological samples, trying to pull a ghost from the shadows. The killer didn't leave much, Mark, Emily reported a few days later, her eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. No semen, no foreign hairs, no fingerprints on Sarah or her clothes, beyond her own. The ligature marks suggest strangulation, highly effective, quick. Almost no struggle beyond the initial shock. He was careful, precise. And the bird. It was clean. Wiped down, I imagine. So, an organized killer, Jensen murmured, running a hand through his thinning hair. Someone who plans, who covers his tracks. Exactly, Emily confirmed, tapping a pen against a psychological profile she was developing. Intelligent, forensically aware. He knew what he was doing. The posing of the body, the bird, is a statement, a twisted form of artistry. He wants to be seen but not caught. He feels powerful, superior. The town grieved for Sarah, but beneath the grief, a palpable fear began to simmer. Who was this monster? And why Sarah? Harmony Creek had never known such evil. Then, a week later, the town's fragile recovery was shattered once more. Michael Chun, a beloved history teacher at Harmony Creek High School, failed to show up for classes. Michael was a quiet man, respected for his gentle demeanor and his passion for ancient civilizations. He lived alone in a small house on the outskirts of town, his life as structured and predictable as Sarah's. Jensen felt a cold wave wash over him as the missing person report came in. Couldn't be. Not again. He dispatched officers to Michael's house immediately. They found nothing amiss. His car was in the driveway, his breakfast dishes in the sink. No sign of forced entry. Just an empty house, and a void where a kind man should have been. The dread became a suffocating blanket. The town braced itself, knowing what was coming. Michael Chun was found 2 days later, not in a secluded forest, but in the town's small, seldom-used community garden, tucked behind the old library. It was a semi-public space, yet hidden enough by overgrown bushes and a crumbling stone wall. His body, like Sarah's, was meticulously posed, laid out amongst wilting rose bushes, his hands folded neatly over his chest. This time, the violence was more apparent. There were signs of a struggle within the garden itself. Upturned earth, a broken ceramic pot. And there it was again, perched delicately on a broken stem of a wilting rose, the small, carved wooden bird, identical to the one found with Sarah. Jensen stared at the scene, a profound sense of despair and fury rising within him. The killer wasn't just a ghost. He was a phantom growing bolder, more confident, almost taunting. Harmony Creek, once a sanctuary, was now a hunting ground. Emily Carter, her face grim, confirmed Jensen's fears. Ligature marks again, Mark. More aggressive this time, but still precise. And the defensive wounds on Michael are more pronounced. He fought back, but the killer still had control. Why Michael? Jensen asked, his voice raw. A young woman, a middle-aged teacher. What's the connection? Emily sighed, running a hand through her short, practical hair. That's what we need to figure out. No obvious links. Different ages, genders, social circles. But the method, the signature. This is the same killer. He's escalating, Mark. Moving from a remote location to a more accessible one. Testing the waters. And he's leaving that bird. He wants us to know it's him. The media descended upon Harmony Creek like vultures. National news vans lined the streets, reporters thrust microphones at terrified residents, and the story of the Harmony Creek killer, or, as some tabloids sensationally dubbed him, the Birdman, became a chilling national headline. The town that had once been a symbol of peace was now synonymous with terror. Jensen looked out at the flickering police lights painting the community garden with an eerie glow. The fear in Harmony Creek wasn't just a local concern anymore. It was a contagion, spreading through every household, every conversation. This wasn't a random act of violence. It was a deliberate campaign of terror orchestrated by an unseen hand. He met Emily's gaze, seeing his own exhaustion and grim determination mirrored in her eyes. He's an apex predator, Emily, Jensen said, the words heavy with the weight of the truth. And Harmony Creek is his hunting ground. We need to catch him before he takes another soul. The sun began to set, casting long, menacing shadows across the garden. The tranquil town of Harmony Creek had been irrevocably altered. The first shadow had fallen, and a terrifying realization settled upon Detective Mark Jensen. This was just the beginning. The killer was out there, watching, waiting, planning his next move, while the town held its breath, wondering who would be next to receive the silent, wooden bird of death. The initial shock of Sarah Jenkins's murder had been a tremor. Michael Chen's death was an earthquake that fractured the very foundations of Harmony Creek. The town, once a bastion of peace, now felt like a stage for a macabre play, its residents unwilling actors in a drama of terror. Doors remained locked, children were kept indoors, and the once vibrant streets grew eerily silent after dusk. The media, having tasted blood, had descended in full force, turning local grief into national spectacle. The Birdman of Harmony Creek blared headlines, further sensationalizing the nightmare. Detective Mark Jensen found himself at the epicenter of a storm he was ill-equipped to weather. His days blurred into an endless cycle of interviews, evidence reviews, and the soul-crushing realization that he was no closer to catching the killer. The small police station had been transformed into a makeshift command center, bustling with agents from the FBI and state police, their presence a stark reminder of the escalating crisis. The organized chaos, however, did little to soothe Jensen's frayed nerves. He felt like a general losing a war on home soil. Dr. Emily Carter, too, was pushing herself to the brink. Her lab work had yielded little more than what she'd already deduced: an organized, forensically aware killer. Both victims, strangled, meticulously posed, and accompanied by the haunting wooden bird. The lack of any discernible connection between Sarah, a vivacious coffee shop barista, and Michael, a quiet history teacher, was the most frustrating aspect. No shared acquaintances, no financial ties, no romantic links, Emily summarized during a late-night briefing. Her voice was flat, tired, but her eyes still held their sharp, analytical gleam. They didn't even frequent the same parts of town. Beyond the park for Sarah and the library for Michael. Jensen ran a hand through his hair, the stubble on his chin scratching. So, no obvious motive, no pattern we can discern. Just randomness. Not randomness, Mark. It's too precise for that, Emily countered, gesturing towards a whiteboard covered in victim profiles and timelines. He's selecting them for a reason. We just haven't found it yet. And the method, the strangulation, the minimal struggle, the clean scene. He's confident. He's learned. He's improving with each kill. The psychological profile, refined by an FBI expert, painted a chilling picture. An intelligent, manipulative individual, likely a male, possibly in his late 20s to 40s, who derives satisfaction from control and the fear he instills. He was likely a loner, outwardly unremarkable, meticulous, and perhaps suffering from a profound sense of inadequacy or grievance that he manifested through violence. The bird, the profile suggested, was his signature, a symbol of his power, his dominance. He wasn't just killing, he was creating a narrative. As the days turned into weeks, the leads dwindled, and the pressure mounted. Harmony Creek's mayor, a portly man named Thompson, held daily press conferences, his voice growing increasingly strained as he tried to reassure a terrified populace. But empty words couldn't fill the void left by fear. Residents started organizing their own patrols, forming neighborhood watch groups that often veered into suspicion and accusations, further fraying the town's already thin social fabric. Jensen had to send patrol cars to break up arguments, to calm frightened citizens who saw phantoms in every shadow. His own family felt the strain. His wife, Susan, a quiet librarian, called him constantly, urging him to come home, if only for an hour. Their daughter, Lily, a bubbly teenager, was uncharacteristically withdrawn, afraid to even walk to the bus stop. Jensen saw the fear in their eyes, and it fueled his desperation. He had to stop this. Then the third shadow fell. 3 weeks after Michael Chen's body was discovered, the town was rocked again. This time, the victim was Eleanor Vance, a 72-year-old retired schoolteacher, beloved for her gentle nature and her tireless volunteer work at the local animal shelter. Her disappearance sparked immediate panic. The pattern was too clear. Jensen found himself standing in front of Eleanor's quaint little cottage, surrounded by petunias, ironically, Mrs. Gable's nemesis, and a meticulously kept rose garden. There were no signs of forced entry. Her morning newspaper lay untouched on the porch. Her small, fluffy terrier, Mr. Wiggles, whined mournfully from the living room window. She would never leave Mr. Wiggles alone. Her neighbor, a tearful Mrs. Henderson, choked out to a patrol officer. Never. And her front door was always locked. Always. Eleanor Vance was found 2 days later, not in the woods, not in a garden, but in the most public of spaces, the gazebo in Harmony Creek Park. It was Saturday morning, a time when families usually gathered, children played. Her body was discovered by a jogging mother, whose scream tore through the morning air like a physical wound. Jensen arrived, his heart sinking with each step towards the yellow tape. The gazebo, usually a symbol of community gatherings, now looked like a sacrificial altar. Eleanor was seated on a bench, her hands clasped in her lap, a serene, almost peaceful expression on her face, an expression that was utterly horrifying given the circumstances. She was dressed in her Sunday best, a pale blue dress she often wore to church, and there it was, nestled in her clasped hands, the familiar, carved wooden bird. "He's getting bolder," Emily said, her voice tight, as she surveyed the scene. A gazebo in broad daylight on a Saturday. He took her, dressed her, posed her, then left her here for maximum impact. "The sheer audacity," Jensen muttered, his jaw clenched. "He wants us to know he's untouchable." The autopsy revealed the same meticulous strangulation. Emily confirmed the killer had dressed Eleanor, as no fibers from the dress were found in her home. It meant he had held her body for some time after the killing, performing a morbid ritual. The killer was not just taking lives. He was staging deaths, transforming his victims into props in his terrifying narrative. The public outcry was deafening. Harmony Creek was no longer just scared. It was furious. News channels ran endless specials, dissecting every detail, interviewing every resident willing to speak. The town became a symbol of vulnerability, a cautionary tale. Politicians used it as a platform, promising more resources, more funding, more anything to catch the monster. Jensen and Emily felt the weight of it all. They were working 18-hour days, fueled by stale coffee and a desperate hope for a lead. They revisited every piece of evidence, every witness statement. They created detailed maps of the town, marking each crime scene, looking for a geographical pattern. Nothing. The locations were varied. Deep woods, a community garden, a public park gazebo. "There has to be something," Jensen insisted, poring over crime scene photos late one night. The faces of Sarah, Michael, and Eleanor staring back at him. A connection, a reason. What links a barista, a teacher, and a retired schoolteacher? Emily, equally exhausted, sat opposite him, sketching on a notepad. "Maybe it's not about who they are, Mark. Maybe it's about what they represent, or where they were taken from, or perhaps the time of day." She looked at him, a sudden spark in her weary eyes. "Let's look at the birds again." All three were identical. But the wood. "You remember I said mahogany or walnut? I've sent samples to a specialist at the State Forestry Department. They can pinpoint the exact species, sometimes even the region." A few days later, the forestry report came back. The wood was indeed dark walnut, but the fascinating detail was this: a specific grain pattern, indicative of trees grown in the indigenous forests surrounding Harmony Creek. Not commercially harvested, but from old growth, likely locally sourced, perhaps even from a specific grove. Jensen felt a jolt. Local wood. So, our guy isn't bringing these in from somewhere else. He's making them here, or has access to wood from here. "Precisely," Emily said, a rare hint of excitement in her voice. "This narrows our focus. We're looking for someone with woodworking skills, who lives in or around Harmony Creek, and has access to specific, old-growth walnut." The investigative team, rejuvenated by the tiny lead, started cross-referencing. Local woodworking shops, carpentry enthusiasts, forest rangers, anyone who dealt with local timber. But Harmony Creek, being in a forested region, had many such individuals. It was a haystack with thousands of needles. Meanwhile, Jensen was grappling with the psychological toll. He started having nightmares, seeing the victim's vacant eyes, hearing the terrified screams of the mother who found Eleanor. He felt the town's fear, its anger, its desperate plea for justice. He knew this killer wasn't just an individual. He was a manifestation of pure, unadulterated evil. And Jensen, the small-town detective, felt the crushing weight of responsibility. One afternoon, while reviewing surveillance footage from the park on the day Eleanor was found, something insignificant caught his eye. A fleeting glimpse of an old, faded blue pickup truck, parked briefly on a side street near the gazebo, out of place, before driving away. The footage was grainy, the license plate unreadable, but the truck had a distinctive dent on the rear fender and a specific sticker on the back window, a small, worn decal of a local high school sports team, the Harmony Creek Hawks. Jensen paused the video, zoomed in. "Emily, get in here." Emily joined him, peering at the screen. "A blue pickup? Common as dirt, Mark. But look at this." Jensen pointed to the decal. "Harmony Creek Hawks. And that dent. It's unique." He remembered something. Michael Chun was a history teacher at Harmony Creek High. He would have known the Hawks. Sarah's younger brother played for them a few years back. It was a flimsy thread, almost invisible, but it was something. A potential link, however tenuous, to the victims or their world. Could the killer be someone connected to the school? A former student? A disgruntled parent? "It's not much," Emily acknowledged. "But it's more than we've had. Let's pull up registrations for blue pickups with that specific model and look for any Hawk-related connections." The task was monumental, sifting through thousands of vehicle registrations, then cross-referencing them with alumni lists, parent associations, faculty rosters. But it was a direction, a sliver of light in the deepening darkness. As Harmony Creek prepared for Halloween, the usual festive decorations were notably absent. Pumpkins sat uncarved, houses remained dark. The vibrant spirit of the town had been replaced by a pervasive sense of dread. The Birdman was still out there, a phantom predator moving silently through their midst. Jensen ended his day in his office, the view of the quiet town square now filled with a sense of foreboding. He stared at the whiteboard, a complex web of theories and dead ends. The blue pickup was their best shot, their only real lead. But it felt so fragile, so easily broken. He picked up one of the replica wooden birds they had made, tracing its delicate wings. The craftsmanship was exceptional, the wood smooth and warm beneath his fingers. Who was this person, capable of such beauty and such terror? The phone rang, jarring him from his thoughts. It was Susan, her voice tight with concern. "Mark, Lily just called. She said someone was watching our house. She saw a blue pickup truck drive by slowly, twice." Jensen froze, the wooden bird slipping from his grasp and clattering to the floor. The chill that ran down his spine had nothing to do with the approaching winter. The killer wasn't just hunting the town. He was hunting Jensen, sending a terrifying message. The game was no longer confined to the shadows. It was personal. And the apex predator had just upped the stakes. The phone call from Susan shattered any pretense of detachment Mark Jensen had managed to maintain. The game was no longer a grim puzzle to be solved from a distance. It had breached the walls of his home, wrapping its cold fingers around his family. The blue pickup truck, the same one they were desperately trying to track circling his house. It was a direct challenge, a chilling declaration of war. Jensen raced home, lights and sirens screaming through the deserted Harmony Creek streets. He found Susan and Lily huddled together, fear etched onto their faces. He swept the perimeter of their house, his hand never leaving the grip of his service weapon, but found nothing. The truck was gone. The chilling implication was clear. The killer knew who he was. He wasn't just observing the town. He was observing its protector. This personal attack galvanized Jensen. The weariness that had clouded his judgment lifted. replaced by a fierce, singular focus. The killer had just made his first real mistake. He'd shown his hand. He'd made it personal, and in doing so, he had ignited a fire in Jensen that no number of unsolved cases had ever managed. The lead on the blue pickup truck, once a fragile thread, now became the center of the investigation. Emily Carter, alerted to the personal threat, worked relentlessly, sifting through the state's vehicle registration database. They cross-referenced every blue pickup, specifically Ford F-150s from the mid-90s to early 2000s, Lily's rough description, with the Harmony Creek Hawks decal, against residents known to have woodworking skills or access to local old-growth walnut. It was a needle in a haystack, but the haystack was now smaller, and the needle had a target painted on it.